It's Ash from Super Videos, back for another video for Season 10 of The Walking Dead. This is going to be my things you may have missed and Easter eggs for the Season 10 bonus episode finale, Season 10 episode 22, which was the Negan backstory episode called Here's Negan. Before we get into this, if you have not yet watched Season 10 episode 22, you obviously don't want to watch this video because I will be going through a lot of the reveals and big moments from the episode, so you may want to watch the episode first before you watch this Easter egg video. But for those of you who have watched it, there's tons of things that I think some people may have missed, especially if you are not a comic reader. There's a lot of great references to the comics and a lot of great callbacks to previous episodes and seasons of The Walking Dead show as well, which we're gonna cover. So stay tuned, we'll be right back to break these all down. Alright, before we get into this, as always, if you're not a subscriber and enjoy the content by the end, consider subscribing to join our community, share and smash the like button, and press the bell to be notified when we upload on the channel. With that said, let's dive right into it. The first thing we're gonna look at is the very first shot from this episode, where we have Maggie and Herschel walking around at Alexandria, and what's very cool about this is that Herschel starts singing "You Are My Sunshine," and I think that was definitely a callback to Season 7 episode 7, which was called Sing Me a Song. In that episode, Negan asks Carl to sing "You Are My Sunshine." The next thing we're going to talk about is the cabin that Carol took Negan to after he was quote-unquote banished. That is actually the exact same cabin that we saw earlier in the bonus bundle, and it was the exact same cabin that Daryl found Leah in. So it was, in fact, Daryl and Leah's cabin. The next thing we're going to talk about is the very first moment when Negan appears as a hallucination. He says, little pig, let me in." There's two things to that. The first is obviously a reference to Season 7 episode 4 called Service, where Negan actually showed up to Alexandria Safe Zone for the very first time, and those were his exact words. Little pig, let me in." But there's another deeper meaning why Negan says that in the hallucination, and that's because he's just trying to get himself to open up and remember his past and allow the memories to come back to him. The next thing we're going to talk about is, as soon as Negan appears as a hallucination, so does the Negan theme song. It's like a very eerie theme song that plays in the background, and we call it the Negan theme song because that exact soundtrack was playing in the background the moment Negan appeared on the show, Season 6, Episode 16, which was called Last Day on Earth. And that theme song actually does play during the final flashback moments of the episode as well, where Negan confronts the biker gang and proceeds to beat him to death with Lucille. Next, we're gonna talk about this right here. So of course, Negan goes back and visits the exact same tree with the frame hanging on it. For those of you that may not remember, that was actually the exact same spot where Negan and Rick had their big fight at the end of Season 8, so Season 8 Episode 16, where Rick slit Negan's throat. Next, we're gonna take a look at this shot right here. A lot of people probably missed this, but when we have Negan in the flashback as a prisoner by the biker gang, the silhouette of one of the biker gangs in the background, and I think that was a comic Easter egg, and it was a reference to the comic covers from the Saviors arc in the comic book, which is called Something to Fear, where we actually had the silhouette of the Saviors. One had like a chainsaw, one had like a sledgehammer, and so on. And obviously one of those featured none other than Negan himself with Lucille. But I definitely think this was a callback or an Easter egg to that. So even though the biker gang were not necessarily the saviors before Negan met with them, like I originally thought, this scene right here where we have the silhouette of one of the biker gangs holding some sort of a weapon was definitely, in my opinion, a callback to Something to Fear. Next, we're gonna take a look at this right here. So Obviously, when Negan is captured, he tried to unscrew the chair so that he could escape. And that's actually one of the key reasons, I think, why the doctor, who was also captured by the biker gang, was able to unscrew the chair to a point where he was able to save himself. The next thing we're going to talk about is this right here. So obviously, when Negan goes to the doctor for the very first time, he is hit across the head with a baseball bat. That is the exact same baseball bat that turns into Lucille later on. But aside from the baseball bat, the person that hits him is none other than Laura. For those of you who may not remember, Laura was one of the members of the Saviors, who actually ended up joining the survivors after All Out War. She was actually killed by none other than Beta. Speaking of Beta, there's a cool Beta Easter egg in this episode as well, which we're going to talk about. But just circling back around to the baseball bat, so of course, Laura is the person that gives Negan the baseball bat that later becomes Lucille when Negan puts the barbed wires around it. But the other thing I was going to mention is that there was a pretty cool visual callback in this episode as well, because this right here, in a way, matches this scene where Negan breaks Lucille. So those two were pretty cool visual contrasts, you could say, that they included in this episode. And I feel like this might even have been some sort of a callback to very first time we saw Lucille as well, because when Negan shows up and shows Lucille to the survivors who are kneeling, it's shot in a very similar way. So I think that that was a callback to the very first time we saw Lucille as well. Next thing I want to mention, which is pretty cool, is that Negan actually comes across the doctor and his daughter Laura at some sort of an RV campsite. The very first time we saw Negan, he stepped out of the RV. Obviously, it's not the same RV, but I thought that was a pretty cool Easter egg that they included there as well. It might be a little bit of a reach, but it's pretty cool regardless. Next is this shot right here where we have Negan holding a red gas canister. This is a callback to the pilot episode, Season 1, Episode 1, where we have none other than Rick Grimes himself holding a red gas canister. This could be another reach, but I feel like it's a pretty cool Easter egg, whether it was intentional or not intentional. Next thing we're going to talk about is this right here. Take a look at the shirt that Lucille is wearing. It says Half Moon, and that's obviously a reference to Half Moon, the country singer, and a great callback or Easter egg to none other than Beta, who was of course Half Moon, the country singer before the fall of society. And this definitely does explain why Negan recognized Half Moon right before Beta died, because he was a fan of Half Moon. Next, we're going to talk about the leather jacket. So of course, the leather jacket that Negan got as a anniversary gift from Lucille is the exact same leather jacket that he had on the very first time we saw him. And that's exactly why he has this sort of close connection, kind of soft spot when it comes to the leather jacket. A soft spot that I feel like he does not necessarily have with Lucille the bat itself. And it could be a reason why he didn't want to take the leather jacket back when Brendan, who helped him escape, offered to give it back to him. The next thing we're going to talk about is actually not even a Walking Dead Easter egg, but it's a Breaking Bad Easter egg. But when we have Lucille hearing about her cancer for the very first time, I thought was a great Easter egg at Walter White hearing about his cancer for the very first time on Breaking Bad. Even the way that it was filmed was very similar. I don't want to say identical, but it was very similar to the way that that scene on Breaking Bad was filmed. And I definitely feel like it was an Easter egg, especially because both Breaking Bad and Walking Dead are on AMC, and we know that they have done other Breaking Bad Easter eggs on Walking Dead and vice versa. Next is something that I think was very obvious, but for those of you who have missed it, Negan didn't actually have an appointment with his parole officer. He actually just used that as an excuse to not want to be with Lucille because he was spending that time with Lucille's best friend, Janine. Next is something that was very cool. Right before Lucille has this kind of breakdown moment, when she realizes or learns about Janine and Negan, we actually have some news on the radio that says, quote, "In some cases, people were eating the flesh out of the victims," unquote. An Easter egg or callback to the zombie virus and the fact that that's exactly how it started. Next thing we're gonna talk about is as soon as Lucille gets back home after receiving the news about her cancer, she actually has a gun in hand. She either wanted to kill herself and Negan or just herself. But obviously she didn't end up doing that, but things do kind of come full circle because when Negan goes back to save Lucille before he finds her dead, he actually sees these open pills right next to the bed. So I'm assuming that Lucille actually took these and she took her own life. And she obviously has a bag on her head, which means that she definitely tried to kill herself, or that's how it comes across. But the other thing that was very cool is that when Negan takes the bag off of Lucille's head, we can actually see that Lucille doesn't have the wig on anymore and she has lost all of her hair. And the pretty neat thing about it is that I feel like this could be a callback to none other than Alpha. Now, something that they actually did in the comics, which they didn't necessarily do in the show, was that one of the reasons why Negan felt the way he did about Alpha was because Alpha reminded him of his wife Lucille. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, which is pretty cool, is that the biker gang leader dude, I don't know what his name is, but that's what I'm going to call him, he actually tells Negan to shut up. And he's begging him to shut up in a way. This comes back around because when Negan goes back, he actually tells the biker gang dude, "The last time we spoke, you told me that I talk too much. Well, this time, you best hope I don't stop talking because when I do, something very terrible is gonna happen to you." Right after Negan burns the house Lucille was in, we can actually see a reveal about what Negan's last name is. Because on the mailbox, it says Smith. Speaking of names, the other cool thing is that during moments of this episode, Negan actually has a baseball cap on that says Savior Athletics. That could possibly be the name of the baseball team that he may have coached, being a gym teacher and all. But it's also maybe the reason why Negan named his group the Saviors. Next thing we're going to talk about is Negan actually has the biker gang dude kneeling in front of him as he gives this kind of monologue or speech, similar to how he had the survivors kneeling in front of him back in season 6, episode 16, Last Day on Earth. There's a moment in this episode where Negan is talking about seeing red. That is definitely an Easter egg and a callback to season 3, episode 12 of The Walking Dead, which is called Clear. And the callback involves Morgan, because in that episode, Morgan tells Rick, "All I see is red." Next thing that I thought was pretty cool is that when they have Negan pointing Lucille, it's actually a POV shot. And I thought that was pretty cool because the lineup scene, they had Negan pointing Lucille at someone, but it was a POV shot, so we never saw their face the very first time. Next thing we're going to talk about is Negan breaking Lucille. That was obviously a direct comic moment because in the comic book, Negan actually breaks Lucille as well, but he breaks Lucille when he hits Beta. But in the TV version, they had Negan breaking Lucille when he hits a random walker. I think that the comic version did it better because, you know, that's more iconic, having Lucille break on Beta than a random walker. But then the next thing I want to mention is this pretty cool shot, which is Negan kneeling down with a broken Lucille in hand, sitting in the exact same spot where his throat was slit. It all ended for Negan here, and it all ended for Lucille the Bat here as well. So I thought that was a pretty cool way to circle things back around. But also the other part of it is that Negan is kneeling just like he made everyone kneel in front of him all of those years. The next thing we're going to talk about is Negan burning Lucille, which was obviously a remixed version of what happened in the comics because in the comics, Negan actually ended up burying Lucille, but in the show, they had Negan burning Lucille, and that was the end of it. And in a way, that's a little more fitting, I would say, because Lucille, Negan's wife, also burned in the house. And that's pretty much it. That's the final thing that I wanted to talk about in this Things You May Have Missed and Easter Eggs video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to share and smash the like button. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe to join our community and press the bell to be notified when we upload. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.